Okay. Well, we'll do the first verse again, and I'll try and play it better than I just did. But that's the basic tune. The first verse is slow and melodic, and the second verse is the chorus is triumphant. For his foes, he arose a victor from the dark domain, and he lives forever with his saints to reign. He arose, hallelujah, Christ arose. Daily they watched his prayer, Jesus my Savior.
It sounds like it should go, yeah. Hold it. No. Go to the verse. It sounds like the way it's written, you could do I'm off, but go up. You not like instead of going, Jesus my Lord, like it's, you go, Jesus.
Jesus, my Lord. Yeah, okay.
It lends itself to that. It lends itself to that.
That's good. Well, next time you sing this, I'll have to remember to do that. So as I was saying earlier, all Easter songs today. Did you notice the Easterness of this song?
It didn't seem different from all the
What was that other song that y'all did before I got here?
Come Behold the Wondrous Mystery and Because He Lives.
Okay.
Because He lives, I can face tomorrow.
That's the one that I missed. I can't even.
Yeah,
Robert Lowry, famous for writing very straightforward hymns.
I would have known this was about Easter if you hadn't told me. So, thanks for telling me.
You wouldn't have known this was about Easter? It's not very on the nose, right?
On the nose.
Instead of He Arose.
Low in the grave He lay, Jesus my Savior, waiting the coming day, Jesus my Lord. Meaning?
Well,
Yes.
he was in the grave waiting for the day that he would rise again.
Yeah. Up from the grave He arose with a mighty triumph for His foes.
He did that.
What's
He
glory?
kicked some butt.
Over, right?
Yeah, over here.
I mean, it's just...
Kick some butt, yeah. That's but not quite as poetic as this, but
Gets the point across though.
Get some butt.
he arose a victor from a dark domain, and he lives forever with the saints to reign. What does that mean?
What?
Okay, so there's a belief, and I don't know if it's specifically Catholicism or whatever, but that the time that Jesus was dead, that he descended into hell.
Yeah. So the creeds say, right? He descended into hell, and on the third day he rose again.
Right. But hell meaning like Sheol, or was it like hell?
So what's meant by hell?
Right.
Some of the creeds say he descended into Hades.
Yeah.
Where does this come from in Scripture? The doctrine, the idea that Jesus might have gone into hell and declared freedom to the captors and said
Captives or captors?
captives. Thank you.
Definitely the captors.
Definitely the captors. I said it to them too. But yeah, while he was dead, the idea that he went to hell and did some stuff is
And one of them was regained the keys to heaven.
yes. And so there's
I don't know if that's Catholicism
there's two
or-
passages. One in I believe it's 1 Peter that talks about how he proclaimed victory over the angels, the demons kept in captivity. And so the suggestion is, when did he do that? Well, he did it while he was dead. His spirit went down to hell. The other one is Ephesians. Really the core text for that doctrine is Ephesians, which you guys just went through Ephesians recently, right?
Yeah.
So you should be well versed in this.
We're still in Ephesians 5.
Yeah, we did the last one of Ephesians 5 today, I believe.
We're a week behind you.
I want to say it's Ephesians 4, but let me double check.
Probably. Probably.
Yeah, because we,
So you kind of know what you're talking about?
yeah.
We're behind in news, so
So that maybe the youth will pay attention and.
Yeah, look at Ephesians
So
4.
that way you can know exactly before, I think.
Go to Ephesians 4, guys.
Where'd it go?
Where to go? I don't know.
I think that's a really catchy tune for Caleb.
Yes, I am.
Oh, hey, you texted me.
Caleb is
Yeah, I was napping. Yeah,
Hey, I've been. It's funny. Like I've been going through poetry in English, and like I just like
When he ascended
for some
on
reason I
high,
just go through like
captured
look for
captives,
the rhyme scheme and songs.
he gave
see if they
gifts
have
to
one. I don't know why.
Yeah.
It's not something I do. I don't. It's weird, but
So, Ephesians chapter 4, this is right after he's done the whole thing about, one body. He prays for them, that Jews, Gentiles get along. You're in the same group now. Therefore, I, prisoner, urge you to walk in a manner worthy of the calling which you have been called, namely the gospel, right? With all humility, gentleness, patience, bearing with one another in love, eager to maintain the unity of the Spirit and the bonds of peace. One body, one Spirit, just as you were called in the one hope that belongs to all of you. One Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God, Father of all, who is over all and through all and in all. But grace was given to each one of us according to the measure of Christ's gift. Therefore it says, when he ascended on high and led a host of captives, and he gave gifts to men. Verse 9. So here we go.
I was about to say, which is from Psalm 68.
Right. Verse 9, this is like a little aside that Paul includes in explaining his quotation of the psalm. In saying he ascended, what does it mean? What does it mean but that he also descended into the lower regions, the earth? That's how ESV renders it.
Mine says, namely the earth, question mark.
Namely the earth, question mark.
Oh,
So what does it mean but that he descended into the lower regions, namely the earth, right? Question mark.
except that he also descended to the lower earthly regions.
The lower earthly
And
regions.
then it has a footnote that says, or the depths of the earth.
Yeah. So this is the question: is when Paul's saying that it says that he ascended, what does it mean except that he descended? Is he saying the lower parts of the earth? It's a genitive there, as in like the hell, Hades, the place below the ground where souls are kept, supposedly, or is it talking about his descent from heaven to earth in the incarnation?
And it's just using an adjective.
It could be an appositional genitive would be the linguistic term. Either rendering is completely legitimate as far as the words he used. It's just a question of which one did he mean.
And we don't know.
And we don't know. I would argue more for the second interpretation, that he did not descend into hell when he died. The appositional genitive, yes.
We at least know that he came to Earth.
Right.
There's nothing else to.
Right, and the contrast is he ascended, meaning we all know what it means when he ascended, right? He left the earth and went to heaven. So in the contrast of what does it mean except that he descended, we're talking about he left heaven and came to earth.
Yeah.
These are the lower regions. This is the domain of darkness. This is what he goes on to say in Ephesians 6, right? We're not warring with flesh and blood, but with prince of the power of the air. We currently live in Satan's world. So that's my interpretation. But it's very common. The Catholic part of Catholic dogma that when Christ died, he descended into hell and set free captives there. I don't think there's anything radically wrong with it. I think there are plenty of good Christians who believe that Christ went into hell to set free people who were in bondage during his death. I just don't find enough basis for it in the text. But that's what the reference is there, because Robert Lowry did hold to that. It was really common back in the
People
early 20th
captive,
century.
or
Some people say it was angels is declaring victory over the captives in that kind of thing. Others will say no, that's people who are awaiting the sacrifice to pay for their sins, that he could set them free from their holding place, Hades. That'd be more the Catholic
Or
interpretation.
it could mean that maybe this shouldn't mean that. I was just going to say that we live in darkness until the light is revealed to us. Like as
Yes.
believers, we live in the dark until
Yeah.
our time to become believers.
And he lives forever with his saints to reign. He arose, hallelujah, Christ arose. Vainly they watch his bed, Jesus my Savior. Vainly they seal the dead, Jesus my Lord. Who's he talking about? Who's they?
The
Priests.
disciples.
Yeah, probably the disciples. Probably we're talking about Joseph of Arimathea, Mary, and Mary, right? The people who got him down off the cross, and watched his bed, sealed the dead, as in they prepared him for his burial. Right? And they're like, we don't have any hope, kind of thing.
I thought it was like the Romans who rolled the stone.
That too, but the Romans probably weren't thinking vainly. They were just like, this is a job. But it's the people who were expecting him to.
Yeah, but vainly they seal him. Well, vainly because he's not going to remain in there.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Nice. Okay.
So it's in vain that they're sealing him in.
Nice. Okay.
That would be the only one that affected them. The first part, it would definitely not be them.
Right. It could be two different things.
Yeah. Up from the grave he rose. Death cannot keep his prey. Jesus my Savior. He tore the bars away. Jesus my Lord. Pretty straightforward image right there, right? What's death in this image?
Prison.
Prison. Yeah.
Death.
The bars.
Up from the grave he rose.
Amen and hallelujah.
I started doing it. Steven was kind enough to join me.
Okay.
I didn't want to.
So some of these paragraphs are from the last time we had a Robert Lowry hymn, and others are new.
Nice.
Well, it's been a long time, and
Yeah.
I don't remember anything.
Yeah, I'm sure you're going to read this, and you're like, God, I already know this. This is sealed in my brain.
Reuse.
Robert Lowry has provided us with many of the most venerable 19th century texts and tunes from the United States. The Philadelphia-born author and composer of this hymn was a popular Baptist preacher and educator who served churches in Pennsylvania, New York City, Brooklyn, and Plainfield, New Jersey. He became known for his gospel songs while ministering in Brooklyn, collaborating often with William H. Doane in producing some of the most popular Sunday school song collections of his day. Among his most famous gospel compositions are Nothing But the Blood and We Shall Gather at the River. He also composed tunes for other texts, such as Marching to Zion, a camp meeting version of Isaac Watts' text, Come We That Love the Lord and Need, a tune for Annie Hawks' hymn, I Need Thee Every Hour. When asked about his method of songwriting, he answered, I have no set method. Sometimes the music comes and the words follow. I watch my moods, and when anything strikes me, whether the words or music, no matter... Are you reading along?
Camera's being disruptive.
She put the paper on my toes.
You want to do anything with it?
I watch my moods, and when anything strikes me, whether words or music, no matter where I am, at home or on the street, I jot it down. My brain is sort of a spinning machine, for there is music running through it all the time. The tunes of nearly all the hymns I've written have been completed on paper before I tried them on the organ. Frequently, the words of the hymn and the music have been written at the same time. And so it was with Christ Arose. During the Easter season of 1874, while having his devotions one evening, Robert Lowry was impressed with the events associated with Christ's resurrection, especially these words recorded in Luke 24:6-8. He is not here, but is risen. Remember how he spoke unto you when he was in Galilee, saying, the Son of Man must be delivered into the hands of sinful men and be crucified, and on the third day rise again. And they remembered his words. Soon, Robert Lowry found himself seated at the little pump organ in the parlor of his home, and in a very spontaneous fashion, there came forth the music and the words, giving expression to the thoughts that had been uppermost in his mind. This hymn was first published in 1875 in the collection Brightest and Best, edited by William H. Doane and Robert Lowry. Sim's verses and refrain depict a vivid contrast between the moods of death and resurrection. Though not indicated on the page, the verses should be sung deliberately. Then a vigorous tempo should be employed for the refrain. Lowry was recognized as a most capable minister of the gospel, possessing keen insight and administrative ability. He became known as a thorough Bible scholar and a brilliant and captivating orator. Few preachers of his day had greater ability to paint word pictures and to inspire a congregation. Music and a knowledge of hymnology were his favorite studies, but always as an avocation.
Which is a hobby.
Yeah.
All
All right, we've got a difficult and long text today, so if somebody could just pray for us in toto.
And I'll just confess I didn't read it beforehand this time.
All right.
The previous weeks I've read it, but I didn't have it.
Good to know.
Just to let you know.
This is like one of those where like you really should have read it.
I know.
So somebody want to pray for us?
That stuff this time.
We'll get into the text.
So read it with her. Be like, hey, I have to study this. Learn about this and be really confused.
I can pray.
Thanks, Caleb.
Dear Father, Lord God, I thank you for today. Lord, I thank you for the blessing of life. I thank you for just being able to meet here, and the true blessing that it is, Lord, to be in fellowship with each other. Lord, I pray and ask that as we get into this complicated, confusing text, I pray that you open our eyes to see what it is that we need to, and help give us discernment and just the ability to absorb the knowledge well. I pray that you help Stephen to explain everything in a way that is understandable, and that each one of us can understand. I love you, Lord. It's in Jesus' name that I pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, sir.
She's always acting so insomnia.
We're in part 7 of our trek through Revelation. If you've been keeping up with all of this stuff, there's one change that I made to the outline, which is on originally, and the way I've taught this in the past and everything, this has always been 6 scenes of hope. I realized there's only 5 as I was studying it this week. 2 that I've been treating as 2 separate scenes are very clearly linked together, and so that'll be clear. It's a very minor thing, but so if you've got your outlines from previous pages and all that, 5 scenes of hope instead of 6. Where are we in the story?
Right there.
Right there. Yeah. Nice.
Right in the middle.
Hopefully, as we've been going through this, you've recognized that there's a couple books that get referenced quite a bit in the book of Revelation. Anybody want to name a couple of them off the top of your heads? Which of these books from in here?
Daniel.
Daniel, yeah. Daniel's got a lot of overlap energy. Sorry? Isaiah. Isaiah's got quite a bit, particularly in the glorification passages when we're singing praises to God.
Zechariah.
Zechariah, yeah.
Is Ezekiel in there too?
And Ezekiel, yeah. Those Daniel, Ezekiel, and Zechariah have a lot of.
Zechariah, not Zachariah. Did you say Zechariah?
Yeah, there is no Zechariah book.
Yeah.
But yeah, Zechariah. In the original Hebrew, the vowels aren't, we don't know what they were.
I
So
remember when I was little calling him Zechariah. So.
Zechariah is John's dad.
I'll be your son.
So that's,
Did you
if
just
you're,
say
if you're
Job?
wondering.
Okay. Go.
Did you just say? You said Job.
It's like Gob.
Don't touch my
G-O-B. Oh, yeah.
Geo.
Today is no different. There's a lot of references to particularly Daniel. A lot of overlap between this section and Daniel 7. So the images in who here is familiar with Daniel 7? It's the four beasts that come out of the ocean, the lion, the
Witch in the wardrobe.
no lion, the bear, the leopard, and the beast. No, okay. So we'll actually probably need to go and actually look at that whole thing. With the little horn.
Leave me alone.
No.
No, I think
Okay.
it's the peanut side. No, it's mine. What is it?
Then the first one that comes up, we'll look at that. Reminder: last time we met was the second lunch break, in which we learned about the two witnesses and the seven thunders, and we plotted all this stuff out on the timeline. Right? Is this ringing bells?
Yes.
All right, jog your memories. All right. Then we did the seventh trumpet, and then immediately we go into another lunch break. So that's seventh trumpet is like right in the middle of two different lunch breaks. So we're right there in the progression of the seals, trumpets, bowls. Outline for today. We're just going to go chapter 12, chapter 13, chapter 14. Chapter 12 and 13 are very clearly linked. They're basically one big allegory. Remember what an allegory is, anyone?
No, it's a story that represents something else.
Yeah, it's a story. It's an extended metaphor story, where all the characters represent something in reality. Right? A lot of Revelation is told in allegorical form, and then there's this one particular allegorical story in the middle, chapters 12 and 13, that require a lot of effort to understand. And so chapter 12 is where we are. If you need help finding the book of Revelation and finding chapter 12 in it, go to the book of Revelation and then move forward 12 chapters, and that's how you find Revelation.
That's a nice twist.
Chapter, yeah, right?
Good job.
I was really struggling. That helps. Thank you, see it.
Yeah, I'm here to clarify things for you.
Oh my gosh, is that lady pregnant?
She
Yes.
is.
And
Did
she's
you not
gonna
read the chapter?
fall
I
from the
was
heavens
being
and
funny.
run through the forest,
So,
chased by a dragon.
picking up in Revelation chapter 12 is the beginning of an extended metaphor, and a great sign appeared in heaven. How do you know that this is the beginning of a big extended metaphor?
Isn't Anne?
A sign appeared to him.
Yeah, a great sign appeared. So he's letting you know. This isn't just like a one-off, or like it's not going to stop being a sign after this woman shows up. There's going to be a dragon and a beast and another beast and a war in heaven, and this is a great sign. This is an allegory. This is a metaphor. A big sign. What does he mean by sign?
That's like a billboard.
Yeah, it's like a billboard. It's like a metaphor. So here's a question that I haven't actually outright discussed with you guys, and I want to make sure we do before we get into this. John's writing this stuff down, right? He's saying, and I saw, and their appearance were like locusts, and they came out, and they had breastplate of yeah. The question is, what is he actually seeing, and is he writing what he's actually saying? So here's your options, right? So let's go one that's a little bit easier to interpret. If we think back on chapter 4, the scene in heaven, right? The throne room. Remember this?
Yes.
Like I saw a throne, and then I saw a lamb standing as one who was slain, and he took the scroll from the one sitting in the throne, right? Is what John saw, did he watch and see a lamb, and did he see creatures like he described them, and those creatures all represent something, and the lamb represents something? Or did he see Jesus, the thing that it represents, and describe it himself as a lamb with 7 eyes and 7 horns?
You gotta look at the context.
You gotta look at the context, for sure. So in that context, which one would you say?
saw a lamb and animals with bunches of eyes.
Yeah.
Because he had seen Jesus before,
Saw Jesus appear on the shore, right?
and he
When he was
didn't
given the-
have any explanation before as to, this is like a metaphor for something else. Like
Right.
Jerusalem is like a lion with bunches of eyes and 6 wings, and
Yeah. So good. So which one is he? What he's describing, is that what he's seeing? And what he's seeing, is that a metaphor for something, or is that the thing itself? So when we get to the question with the attack helicopters, right? Everybody sees the locusts, and you see him describe the locusts. They're saying, did he see helicopters, and he's trying to figure out how to describe them, so he describes them like locusts, and he's wearing breasts of armor and flowing hair and all that? Or is he seeing things that look like locusts, and maybe those locust things that he's seeing represent attack helicopters, or maybe not? You see the issue in interpretation that this creates. So I've been trying to teach this from the perspective without outright saying it, and I think it's beneficial to say it. He's seeing the stuff that he says he sees. He saw a lamb that had 7 eyes and 7 horns, and he understands what that lamb represents. It represents the Christ. And he understands what the 7 eyes and the 7 horns represent, because he tells you they represent the 7 spirits of God going out of the earth. What we're about to see, he talks about a great sign appears, and he sees a woman clothed in the sun and standing on the moon with stars and a dragon. What he's actually seeing looks like a woman and a dragon, just like he's describing it. He understands that these things that he's seeing represent some literal reality that's going to play out on earth. Does that track? When you're interpreting Revelation, you have to be clear about this, because it will affect your interpretation as you're going through, as we've already kind of established with stuff like the locusts. Question?
I don't get why the pregnant.
We're about to see it, so let's read the text and then
Check.
I'll... So, this is a vision, a sign, a metaphor that he sees. A woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. She was pregnant and was crying out in birth pains and the agony of giving birth. That's why she's pregnant, because that's what he sees.
Okay.
She's going to give birth here in a second, and it'll be a little bit clearer. But I want to get the pieces first. All these pieces represent something. So we've got a woman. We're just going to describe what he sees. We'll talk about what she represents after we've gotten through a little bit further in the passage. So describe the woman for me. How does he see her?
clothed with the sun.
Clothed with the sun, moon under her feet, crown of 12 stars, no specific number, and she's pregnant, yeah. I always like that. Not only is she pregnant, she's in labor, right? She's crying out in birth pains, which I love. When you try and find pictures of the artist renderings of this, she's always in this serene position. It's like, did you... No! Her feet are in the stirrups. Like,
Is that what it's like, Mom?
she's screaming for the epidural right now.
Well, it's like Silent Night. Really?
Yeah.
It's like Silent Night.
Right? But anyway, we'll forgive the artists for that. She's pregnant. She's in birth pains, about to give birth, crying out. Verse 3, and another sign appeared in the heaven. Behold, a great red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his heads 7 diadems. What are diadems? Crowns. His tail swept down 1/3 of the stars of heaven and cast them to the earth, and the dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth, so that when she bore her child, he might devour it. She gave birth to a male child, one who is to rule the nations with a rod of iron, but her child was caught up to God and to his throne. The woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared by God, in which she is to be nourished for 1,260 days. Hey, there's that number again.
40 months.
42 months. 3.5 years. Half of 7. Same amount as we've seen previously. Dragon, describe him for me.
Red.
Red.
7
Tails.
heads and 10 horns.
7 heads, 10 horns. He's got a tail. What's he do with his tail?
Third of all the stars are wiped out.
To
Wait,
Earth.
did we? We
Sweeps
haven't read that.
down
we
a
haven't
third
read
of
that part yet.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah,
We
we did.
did? No, we did
Yeah, we
not.
did.
It's verse 4. His tail swept down a third of the
there
stars
it
of
is.
heaven
There.
and cast them onto the
That's verse
earth.
4. Never mind.
Denise, if you read, you would know.
I read it.
I'm
My phone
not
was going crazy.
ready for this ass today.
We
Okay,
just read
to
it.
let you know. I know, but I didn't hear that part yet.
I was too busy.
And what's he
trying
doing?
to figure out the horns
He's
head.
Waiting for her to give
Eat the
birth so
baby.
he can eat him.
Waiting for her to give birth so she can devour her child. Okay.
I've been
That
told
was
sometimes
awesome.
it's difficult to catch the baby as it comes out.
That's how birth works.
So.
Let's talk about who these two images represent, because these ones are pretty clear and you can get a pretty good solid answer
Yeah, I
from
was
the text.
confused about the woman, but the dragon, you figured that out in
The
chapter.
woman,
Yeah.
Israel.
The dragon specifically tells you. The woman. Who is it?
Israel,
Israel. I think it's Israel.
the woman,
Mother
comma,
Earth?
Israel,
Yeah.
the dragon.
These are
comma,
some of the proposed
Satan.
options, and the way you interpret the woman is going to affect how you interpret all the rest of this image. Who is the woman, and to whom is she giving birth? This is an important question. I say the woman's Israel, and I'll show you in a second. But some of the other options, Mary, just makes sense. Why would people say Mary?
Because
They're
Mary
Catholic.
gave birth to
Because
Jesus.
people
Because
like
they're Catholic.
using marriage and stuff.
And because Mary gave birth to Jesus, and she seems like the focus is on the one that you're giving birth to, and he's caught up to heaven. Okay, yeah, Mary's the one who did that. What about the church?
I kind of thought the church.
Okay, why would you think the church?
I don't know. It just seemed like I don't really know why. I just kind of thought I was like,
Israel.
oh, it might be like the church or something.
It's
Because
kinda
they
this-
describe
this hazy
Israel as
picture.
his place of what's it called? Because they kill the two witnesses out in the street and they party in the streets. I
Yeah,
figure that's happening in Israel, and
yeah, in the land of Israel, right?
so I mean it could be the 12 tribes. That could be why there's 12 stars
Yeah, there you
on
go.
her head.
So yeah,
That would include the church, wouldn't it?
so this is
Israel and the church.
Israel and the church.
And what's giving birth?
Again, your theology is gonna. So let me first demonstrate that why I think this is Israel, and then we'll get into the question of does this include the church. So why is this Israel? Turn to Genesis 37. What's going on in Genesis 37? Somebody read the first heading you see when you get there.
How do we get to Genesis, Steven?
You go to the back cover of your Bible and you keep turning left for a really long time.
Genesis 37.
You'll eventually hit Genesis.
Joseph's dream.
Joseph's dream, right? Who knows the story of Joseph? He's out. He has this dream. He tells his brothers, "I had a dream
They
that,"
sell him into slavery.
and they sell him into slavery. But first, what's the dream of?
The lots
The
of
wheat.
bowing
The
things.
Technicolor.
So I dreamed that all of us were sheaves of wheat out in the fields, and your sheaves all turned and bowed down to mine. Does this mean that I'll rule over you? He has another dream. Starting in verse 9. He dreamed another dream and told it to his brothers and said, "Behold, I have dreamed another dream. The sun and the moon and 11 stars were bowing down to me." But when he told it to his father and to his brothers, his father rebuked him, saying, "What is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall I and your mother and your brothers indeed come to bow ourselves to the ground before you?" And his brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the saying in mind. So Jacob helps you in interpreting Joseph's dream. Who's the sun and the moon in Joseph's dream? Yeah, Jacob and Rachel. And the 11 stars are his brothers. Reuben, Simeon, Levi, etc.
I have to name them all now.
So the 12th star would be
Jacob.
Joseph.
Joseph.
Jacob's the dad, right? Just Jacob is the Jacob's name later gets changed to
Gosh, didn't you read it, Cameron?
I didn't read Genesis.
Israel. Jacob's name gets changed to Israel. This particular imagery, sun, moon, and 12 stars, comes straight out of Joseph's dream about his family, which we know becomes the 12 tribes of Israel.
So the lady is Rachel.
The woman is Israel. She's adorned with the 12 stars, and her appearance is as the sun. Right? Who's the son in Jacob's dream, or in Joseph's dream? Jacob, whose name is Israel. Right? Her appearance is as of Israel. Israel is often related to a woman, the bride of God. Ezekiel 16 is the clearest one that I can think of, where there's just, again, this extended allegory where God describes Israel as a woman that he raises and marries, and then she goes and prostitutes herself with other false gods, and then he redeems her and saves her. And, all throughout the story, Israel's always this woman. Hosea, right? You know the story of Hosea. Goes and marries Gomer, a woman. Gomer goes and sleeps around, and then God tells him, what is this all a picture of? It's a picture of God loving Israel. Israel is the bride of God. Israel is God's chosen people. The woman's Israel. Which would make the son, it's kind of obvious who the son is through this story, right? Who?
Israel.
Jesus, yeah. Why is it kind of obvious?
You said the sun and the moon are the parents.
S-O-N, son, in chapter 12. The son that the woman gives birth to.
Gotcha.
My bad. Yeah, you were giving a valid answer. I thought you were just... He was talking about the S-U-N.
There's
son.
2 sons in this thing.
She gave birth to twins.
A UN and an ON.
In English, there's 2.
We're not.
The child that she gives birth to is Jesus, right? How do we know? Well, the clearest indication is he ascends into heaven, and what he does, what the description of him is, she gave birth to a male child, one who is to rule the nations with a rod of iron. Who's supposed to do that, according to the prophets?
Jesus.
The Messiah, Jesus, yeah. So, we've got Israel, the woman who gives birth to the son. That's the story from the beginning, right? What's the promise to Eve? Genesis 3:15.
Crush the head of the serpent.
Seed of the woman will crush the head of the serpent. There'll be enmity between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent.
Dragons are serpents too.
That's who we're looking for this whole time, is the seed who's going to crush the head of the serpent. So the woman's Israel. I'm very, very confident of this, and this is going to filter
And
down
the church.
how we attack. So does this Israel include the church?
Because it includes Ephraim.
No, let's
And
Just
Ephraim
second.
is the
Just second.
masses.
Yeah.
So, when she's clothed with the sun,
Mhm.
which sun, S-U-N, what is that supposed to be?
Jacob, Israel.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so in chapter 12 of Revelation, you've got the sun, the moon, and the stars. This is a reference back to Joseph's dream. And
Okay.
in Joseph's dream, the sun and the moon were the father and the mother, Jacob and Rachel.
Okay.
And the stars are the 12 tribes.
Wouldn't
Okay.
it be Jacob and Leah because Leah is Jacob's true wife?
Yeah, and actually, yeah, you could very well make that case.
But Leah wasn't the mother of
Joseph. Rachel was
Yeah,
I'm
Joseph's
trying to
mother.
put
Yeah,
yourself
he says
in
your
the story,
mother.
yeah.
I'm just saying.
You guys are confusing.
she read.
The dragon. How do we know who the dragon is?
Because it says
Says
so.
later in the chapter.
It says so later in the
that's
chapter, right? So let's keep
Baal.
reading.
Because there's
But
enmity
what
between
about the Mother Earth theory? That sounds weird.
Yeah.
The Mother Earth theory is put forward by liberals who
Yeah.
really don't want this to be either the church or Mary or Israel. Those are the 3 remotely reasonable ones are those.
That's gross. I do
If you
like
know your
how-
Bible well, the only reasonable one is this.
I do like how you don't have
And
a question
that
mark
one.
under Israel or after Israel. It's
Yeah.
just like Israel. Huh?
I'm trying to let you know what the other views are.
Because it
but-
can include the church as well.
Anyway, we can continue.
So does this include the church? In the image, the woman gives birth to Jesus. Yes, we're good on that. We might even say that the woman gives birth to Jesus, whose body is
The church.
the church. So where's the church in this image?
Ephraim.
The baby.
One of the 12 stars.
It's seen in the Christ. Yes. Which actually, we're about to get that in verse 5. This is a pre-tribulation rapture passage. Is verse 5. Read the. Yeah. The serpent is the dragon is Satan. The serpent. We get to that in verse 9.
Satan.
stood before the woman to devour her child at birth. What's that referencing? What does Satan want to do? Stop the seed from coming, right? This fits very well with the flow of the metaphor. Why is the dragon waiting for the woman to give birth and wants to devour it? He doesn't want the promised Messiah who's going to crush his head to show up, right? He wants to kill him. He's attempting to prevent the Messiah. You can see this were some that came to mind, the temptation of Jesus, right? When he takes Jesus out in the wilderness, he's trying to basically invalidate him as the Messiah, make him sin, make him not able to crush his head. I'll leave that. Get behind me, Satan. That's the Matthew 16:23. Same thing. Satan is actively trying to keep Jesus from making it to the cross because he knows what's going to happen to him when Jesus gets to the cross.
That's rude.
Tail swept a third of the stars. I think it's the fall of demons. We think demons are just fallen angels, right? And when did that happen? I think it's probably that. I haven't heard any other good suppositions of what this is a reference
That's the
to.
only thing that I've ever heard that was.
Yeah. Anybody who tries to actually interpret Revelation lands on this. So we'll get that, and there's substantiation for that in verse 7. But the verse 5. Dragon standing there waiting. Verse 5. She gave birth to a male child, who is to rule the nations with a rod of iron. But her child was caught up to God and to his throne. The word there, caught up. You recognize that word from another eschatology passage that we studied recently in the book of Thessalonians?
Yep.
What is
the
it?
Lord himself will descend with something about with a shout and the voice of the archangels and
And we who are still alive will be
caught up together with him.
caught up together with him.
To
Yeah.
meet the Lord in the air.
Yeah, that's the reference to the rapture. That's what harpazo is the word that gets translated as to rapture in English. So there's an old view, not very popular anymore, but I'm completely convinced of it, that verse 5 is a reference to the rapture. The child is born, child Christ, whose body is the church, and he is caught up into heaven.
But wouldn't this be a mid-trib rapture then?
Good question. I don't
'Cause it's
think so.
3.5 years of her being in the wilderness. So you think this is the first 3.5 years is going to be her in the wilderness?
Do I think that? Yes, I do.
It would seem that the wilderness would be the after the witnesses are dead.
No, see, I think it's the opposite.
So you think the wilderness is when they have the
It's in the first half.
what's it called, the
The witnesses giving authority, preaching in the city. Yeah. I think that the believing remnant of Israel, the woman, gets taken off into the wilderness while the witnesses are in the debaucherous city of Jerusalem trying to convert any who would believe, and they do not. They kill him. They kill them. So. I mentioned this last time we met. That I think that the 1260 for the days is always a reference to the first half, and 42 months is always a reference to the second half. I think that's how you kind of keep it straight. I think that's how John was keeping it straight. Not a super big deal, but yes, I do think that the time in the wilderness is the first half, and so this is a pre-trib
But
rapture
the
passage.
140,000 that were marked, that goes through the entire 7-year tribulation?
Yes, I think those who were marked were marked at the beginning of the tribulation, whether they knew it or not.
Yeah.
They show up again here in chapter 14, right?
Yeah.
But we'll get there. I think this is a rapture passage. Unfortunately, I don't have time to really dig into that. I think it's really interesting. But if you run across anybody who denies the rapture and they don't like the 1 Thessalonians 4 passage, possible to give them this one as well. This is a reference to the same doctrine. She goes into the wilderness, place prepared by God, will she be nourished for 1,260 days. I do think this is a reference to the 144,000, the believing remnant of Israel.
Okay. in verse 5,
Mm-hmm.
you have caught up to God and to his throne. Is that God's throne or is that the child's throne?
God's. I believe.
Linguistically, it'd most likely be God's throne. The nearest antecedent would be.
Okay. And
God.
his there is capitalized.
Either way, it'd be.
Okay.
The other option for this, if this isn't a rapture passage, if we're not talking about the church and we're just talking about the person of Jesus, who is a child, then this is a reference to his ascension, yes? Which is possible. But given what happens directly after that, I suggest that we're talking about eschatology stuff, so we're not just talking about Jesus being caught up. As far as a single person, is this child representative of a single person or a nation? Well, is the woman a single person? No, she's representative of a nation. So why wouldn't her child also be representative of a people group, the church? Which does include Israelites prior to the tribulation. So
It just clicked for me.
it clicked?
Yeah.
All right. Going on to verse 7. So after the woman goes off into the wilderness for 1260 days, now war arose in heaven. So the now there lets you know this doesn't necessarily follow chronologically, but it can. That's the Greek word there. Sometimes it means then, sometimes it means and, sometimes it just means also. By the by.
Yeah, it's confusing when they put then.
Yeah. It's very
That's what my
confusing.
Bible reads. It says then more broke.
It just says, and there was war.
I do think chronologically makes plenty of sense here, but not necessarily. Now war arose in heaven, Michael and his angels fighting against the dragon. And the dragon and his angels fought back. But he was defeated, and there was no longer any place for them in heaven. And the great dragon was thrown down, that ancient serpent who is called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. He was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. Okay, so
It seems like it happened. You said it makes sense that it could be chronological. It could be chronological.
yeah.
But given that, it seems like it's describing the downfall.
Yeah, it seems like it might be describing the fall, right? So there's two conflicting things here. So one is the war in heaven. Okay, is that what's going on at the fall? Is there a war going on that Michael and Satan are fighting? I don't think so. I think during the fall, it's kind of peacetime, and then instantly they fall, and they're cast out. But then there's the contrary, which is there's no longer a place found for them in heaven, which suggests, okay, well, wait a second. Was there a place for demons in heaven prior to the end times? What do you think? Was there a place in heaven for demons prior to the end times? You think of any biblical passages where demons are seen in heaven? Job 3, right?
When Satan is petitioning God.
Yeah, the sons of God are gathered before the throne, and Satan was among them, and God said to him, Satan, where have you come from? Oh, roaming about the earth here and there. Have you considered my servant Job blameless and upright? Satan's allowed to be there. What about the seeming command of God over demons routinely?
Maybe that's why the Catholics think that Satan had the key to heaven.
Yeah, possibly.
Yeah, not necessarily the key, but he had a key.
So yeah, I don't have any problem with this being an eschatology thing, that a war breaks out near the end times, or a war has been going on, and finally here near the end times, Michael and his angels get a massive victory and officially cast out Satan and his demons.
I don't. That was about to sound pretty sacrilegious, so
Okay.
I would not say that.
Daniel 10 suggests this very thing, that a war is constantly going on that we can't see. Daniel 10, Daniel has a vision. He asks for help from God, and then it takes him 21 days. It takes 3 weeks, and then an angel shows up, and he's like, what took so long? And he's like, oh, I was fighting a war for 21 days, and then Michael came and helped me, and I got here. It's like,
If you want
Okay.
a totally fictional account to get a picture in your head, think of Frank Peretti's This Present Darkness.
yeah. Yeah.
and Piercing the Darkness. Those two books are amazing.
Yeah.
Will be good.
But yeah, there is some kind of war going on in heaven. Flip over to Daniel 12 with me. How are we doing? True.
Chew. Choo.
Daniel 12.
Bum, 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 bum.
Daniel 11 is the most confusing chapter in Daniel. We won't do too much into that, but suffice it to say, Daniel 11 ends at the end times. Okay?
Daniel 12, you said?
Yeah, so Daniel 12 continues on from where Daniel 11 picked up, or left off. At that time shall arise Michael, the great prince who has charge of your people being Israel. And there shall be a time of trouble, such as has never been seen since there was a nation till that time. But at that time your people shall be delivered, everyone whose name shall be found written in the book. And many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, some to the shame and everlasting contempt. This is describing end times stuff, and at the end times, Michael shall arise. What does arise mean? I think it's a reference to him going up from the earth, where he's guarding over Israel, and in my view, he's acting as the restrainer. He arises as in he leaves, goes and fights Satan, who keeps the restrainer away, and casts him to the earth officially and finally. Says, you're not allowed in heaven anymore, and Satan's like, rebellion time. I know this is weird stuff, so...
So wouldn't that be like millennial kingdom time?
When he casts Satan to earth,
Yeah.
not into the abyss yet.
But it seems like all of that had to happen before. Well, not necessarily before, but like before all of the end time stuff happens.
All of the casting to earth and all that?
Yeah.
Why?
I don't know.
Yeah.
It just seems to make sense that it would be in that order to me.
Well, yeah, I think this is at the beginning of the tribulation.
Why
He
is
casts
a
him
huge
to-
dragon that small and it doesn't have
It's not a dragon.
7 heads?
Yeah, this is a reference to just Satan. This is from Paradise Lost by Milton.
This could be the passage where the Catholic Church gets the idea of purgatory. Multitudes who sleep in the dust of the earth will awake, some to everlasting life, others to shame and everlasting contempt. That's what I don't know.
But yeah, I think all of this, the war that breaks out in heaven, is at the beginning of the tribulation, and that's when Satan is cast down. I think all of this is so. He's waiting for the Christ to be born.
Do you think wormwood is Satan?
No. The rapture happens, and the woman goes off into the desert for 1,260 years, and war happens, and the Satan's cast down to earth. I think all that happens here, right? The woman's in
And then the tribulation.
and the tribulation kicks off. War breaks out on earth, mirroring what's going on in heaven.
Okay, so I was thinking the demons that are in heaven, if they're in heaven, they're angels, and then when they're cast down, they're demons.
Yeah, no, and so what I'm saying is they've already rebelled.
Yeah.
They're just allowed in heaven still. And they'll be locked out of heaven. Get the door locked on them.
God ain't scared.
And they come down to earth officially.
Okay.
And realize I'm just giving you my interpretation of these things. There's a lot of other interpretations out there. We just only have so much time, and so I'm trying to give you the one that seems to make most sense to me. So I would encourage you to be
Jesus and
thinking
Satan
through
are
these
having
and
discourse
considering
right now.
contrary options. When he does that, there's no longer a place found for them. There's rejoicing in heaven. Salvation, power, glory to our God, to his Christ, they have come. This is another passage where I say, look, the kingdom isn't now for us here in the 21st century. It starts off in the end times. because I think all this happens in the end times. And so when Satan is cast down, I heard a loud voice in heaven saying, "Now salvation and power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Christ have come. For the accuser of our brothers," that's Satan, "has been thrown down, who accuses them day and night before our God, and they have conquered him by the blood of the Lamb, the word of their testimony, for they loved not their lives even unto death." So, right. Who is it who overcomes by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony? For they love their lives even unto death. Martyrs, particularly, I'm saying martyrs from the tribulation. Keep reading. Therefore, they show up again here in chapter 14. But yeah, I think that song is improperly applied to us unless we make it to the tribulation and die for our faith. We don't continue singing the rest of the verse. They shall overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony, for they loved their lives even till death. They died for it.
Testimony.
Did I say that?
Yes.
Oh, sorry. Therefore rejoice, O heavens, and you who dwell in them, but woe to you, O earth and sea, for the devil has come down to you in great wrath, because he knows his time is short. We're getting to the end game.
Thanks for that, Stephen.
You're welcome. Now remember, the woman has been cast out into the wilderness, or has been really taken to the wilderness for her safety, for 1260 days. Satan gets cast down from heaven, and now that he's out of heaven, he starts going after her. Verse 13. Dragon saw that he had been thrown down to earth. He pursued the woman who had given birth to the male child, but the woman was given the 2 wings of the great eagle so that she might fly from the serpent into the wilderness, to the place where she is to be nourished for a time, and times, and half a time. This language comes straight out of Daniel. A time, times, and half a time.
3.5 years.
3.5 years. A time, 1. Times, as in 2 of them, and half of a time. 3.5, right? 3.5 years.
You know why I say it that way? Just to
For poetic effect. Well, he's saying it here because that's exactly how Daniel said it. Right?
Yes, but why did Daniel say it?
Why did Daniel say it that way? Probably poetic effect.
So the wings from the eagles that
3.5 years,
referring
1260
to
days.
the beast that's like an eagle, is that something different?
It's probably just wings of an eagle.
Okay.
Yeah. Just the
What?
speediness.
Okay.
Why are they talking about her going into the wilderness twice? Is this the second time they did?
He's picking up where, so it's like she goes off into the wilderness. Now, there was a war in heaven, so she goes off into the wilderness. Now, let me tell you about
What
stuff
happened
that's going
just
on.
at the same time.
Yeah, as she's going off into the wilderness, Satan was cast down. He went to earth. He got mad and he pursued her into the wilderness, and that's why she was taken away. What prompted her being taken off into the wilderness to the place that was prepared by God. Does that track?
No, that's okay.
Dragon.
It's like he pauses and he gives you background information to explain why she's going off into the wilderness and the whole Satan being cast down, and he picks back up again in verse 13. So remember, she went off into the wilderness, so this is why. Satan was cast down, he pursued her, and God preserved her.
And that's why
took
she
her off.
went for times, and time.
Yeah. She's going off into the wilderness, and what does Satan do to try and get her?
Poured a river from his mouth.
Put a river from his mouth, a flood. But the earth
The earth turned it into a waterfall.
opens up. The open earth swallows it. Came to the help of the woman, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed the river. And the dragon had poured from his mouth. The dragon became furious with the woman and went off to make war with the rest of her offspring. On those who keep the commandments of God and hold to the testimony of Jesus, and he stood on the sand of the sea. All right. New obstacle interpretation.
That's reinforcing for the view that the woman is Israel.
Yes. Exactly. The woman is believing Israel, the remnant. So who does he go off to get?
144,000?
Well, that's who I'm saying is Israel, the 144,000.
Oh, okay.
So he goes off to get Gentiles who are coming to faith during the tribulation, right? People who have seen the rapture and have started off down this road and begin believing and who keep the commandments of God and hold to the testimony of Jesus.
But yet they're still her offspring, so that would lend itself to the idea that the woman is...
But the woman is Israel and her offspring
And the
is
church.
the church.
Right, so
The Gentiles coming to faith,
Is the church.
who are becoming the church.
Yeah.
Because the church is already raptured.
Keeping track of all the players, yeah.
shut up.
However, this is one of the verses that people will use for a mid-trib or a post-trib rapture. Say, look, the other offspring, that's the rest of the church who hasn't been raptured yet. But I'm saying no, the church has been raptured. It's people who come to faith after the rapture. Not a big deal. Not a big point of distinction. It's already 5:00, so I don't have time to get into that part.
Jaguar.
He can't get the woman in the desert, so he turns his attention back to the church. Chapter 13.
Bear hooves.
Or excuse, at the end of chapter 12. So he goes off to make war on the rest of her offspring, the commandments of God of the whole to the... And he stood on the sand of the sea. Okay. Standing right on the edge of the sand of the sea. Yeah, we'll go through and then we'll explain. And I saw a beast rising out of the sea with 10 horns and 7 heads, with 10 diadems on its horns and blasphemous names on its heads. Okay, where have we just seen this? On the dragon, right? So another beast is coming up who's got the same amount of heads and horns.
Beelzebub.
And the beast that I saw was like a leopard. Its feet were like a bear's, and its mouth was like a lion's. And to it the dragon gave his power and his throne and great authority. One of its heads seemed to have a mortal wound, but its mortal wound was healed. And the whole earth marveled as they followed the beast. They worshipped the dragon, for he had given his authority to the beast. And they worshipped the beast, saying, "Who is like the beast, and who can fight against it?"
So, real quick, before you start to break this down.
Yeah.
It seemed like, seems like this could be another version of the dragon, the wound being from when the dragon fell.
The problem with that is within the actual metaphor, it mentions both the beast and the dragon, right?
Yeah.
Maybe this is one of the guys that he swept with his tail.
I guess possibly, yeah. And probably, yeah, demonically empowered. But in the actual that he's saying, there's a beast and there's the dragon who's giving authority to the beast. So they can't be the same entity. They've got to be representing two different people. Yes, this is the little horn. If you know Daniel 7.
So this is just a king guy that arises
Yes.
in that area
We'll get there.
with Babylonian roots.
Everybody clear on the image of the beast, what he looks like, what he does?
Medio-Persian roots.
Keep reading so we've heard the whole text.
I guess that's all of the roots.
And the beast was given a mouth uttering haughty and blasphemous words, and it was allowed to exercise authority for 42 months. I think that's a reference to the second half. Yeah. And it opens his mouth to utter blasphemies against God, blaspheming his name and his dwelling, that is, those who dwell in heaven. Also, it was allowed to make war on the saints and to conquer them, and authority was given it over every tribe and people and language and nation, and all who dwell on the earth will worship it, everyone whose name has not been written before the foundation of the world in the book of the life of the Lamb who was slain. If anyone has an ear, let him hear. If anyone is to be taken captive, to captivity he goes. If anyone is to be slain with the sword he must be slain. Here is a call for the endurance and faith of the saints. So this guy takes over. I think this beast represents a single person, a single ruler, a single man who arises. 7 heads and 10 horns. I guess it's time we do need to look at that. Where's the 7 heads and 10 horns come from? Turn back to Daniel 7. Have you guys at least heard vaguely of the Daniel 7 with the 4 beasts, the 4 animals that come out of the ocean? Not even at all?
I don't know.
Okay.
It's really interesting. We got the lopsided bear. Wait, is that the right one?
Yeah.
Lopsided bear, the jaguar, the lion,
Yep.
and the beast.
This is a good picture. I want just a picture. So in this image that Daniel has, remember where we are in the story with Daniel. He's right here, yeah, in captivity, waiting to be taken back into the land.
Oh yeah.
God gives him a vision and says, "This is what's coming down the pike for the Middle East." Gives him a vision of 4 animals. So pick up in Daniel chapter 7, verse 1. First year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel saw a dream and visions of his head as he lay in bed. He wrote them down, the total sum of the matter. Daniel declared, "I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the 4 winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea. 4 great beasts came up out of the sea."
So that's also referencing back to
Yeah.
the 4 guys that were sitting around the throne, right? Or are those
No,
the things that are holding back those guys?
They're the things that are holding back, yeah. The first was like a lion and had eagle's wings. That's Babylon. Then as I looked, its wings were plucked off, and it was lifted up from the ground and made to stand on 2 feet like a man, and the mind of a man was given to it. That's a reference to Nebuchadnezzar and his conversion, which is described in Daniel chapter 4. Take my word for it. Go read it. It's really interesting. Nebuchadnezzar you'll see in heaven. Or the new earth, I should say. And behold, another beast, a second one, like a bear. It was raised up on one side, and it had 3 ribs in its mouth between its teeth. And it was told, "Arise, devour much flesh." After this I looked, and behold, that's Medo-Persia. Yeah, thanks. Raised up on one side because the Persians were stronger than the Medes and ultimately conquered them. So after Babylon, the Medo-Persians came in, conquered everything in the Middle East. After this I saw, looked like, behold, another like a leopard, had 4 wings of a bird on its back, and it had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. This is Greece, led by Alexander the Great, right? He comes in and he conquers everything that the Persians had control of. He's got 4 heads because his empire was divided into 4 different sub-kingdoms after Alexander the Great died. And then, after this, I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, terrifying and dreadful and exceedingly strong. It had great iron teeth. It devoured and broke it pieces and stamped what was left with its feet. It was different from all the other beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. I considered the horns, and behold, there came up from among them another horn, a little one, before which 3 of the first horns were plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of man, and a mouth speaking great things. Okay.
Could be
Start with, how many heads are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah? How many horns are there? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay. 7 heads, 10 horns. That's where we get 7 heads and 10 horns from. It's from the conglomeration of all of the nations that came after and ultimately lead to the end. Babylon, Persia, Greece, Rome. This is the succession of conquest in the Middle East from Daniel's time onward. And then if you're reading this in Hebrew, there's actually a linguistic break. I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another horn, a little one, before which 3 of the first horns were plucked up by the roots, and behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of man, a mouth speaking great things. This is the beast from Revelation chapter 13. We call him today the Antichrist in our circles. He speaks great things. He speaks strong blasphemies. He comes up bearing images from this, 7 heads and 10 horns, the representative of Satan on earth, the guy who's going to come and wreak havoc. There's a reference to a head that has a mortal wound and comes back from it, right? He seems to die. Yeah, so that's some suggest that this is Rome, the nation dying off and then being revived. A revived Roman Empire is often how it's talked about in the dispensational circles that y'all are running in. I don't know exactly what's going on with the head that dies. My best guess, this is talking about the reality that this all represents. What is this all going to point to? I think this is a guy who shows up on the world scene, great military leader, talks big things, gets everybody following him. He's a charismatic, amazing guy, and he seems like he dies, probably in battle of some kind. And then he is miraculously revived to the point where it looks like a resurrection kind of revival. Like he's dead and comes up out of the grave. And now imagine this actually happening on Earth. Imagine we get news that Donald Trump is dead, and he's been declared dead, and then no, he's been resuscitated. And everybody's like, whoa, this guy's even beating death. I'm not saying Donald Trump's the Antichrist. I'm just...
Especially since like half the country doesn't like him. So,
Yeah.
I mean, it's yikes for me.
But he comes up and everybody loves him. Everybody is worshiping him, praising him. Why? Because of the power of the dragon. Because the dragon is powerful and gives him that kind of power. And he's given authority to exercise for 42 months.
In the second half.
So this is the second.
Correct.
half, because you said 42 months.
Right.
But so does the dragon give him the power to revive? I mean, is that part of the power that the dragon gives
We
him?
assume so.
Yeah, we don't know. I would say possibly.
So Donald Trump is not the Antichrist because we are not living in tribulation.
Yes.
Probably
That
and
is not
possibly.
charismatic.
I would say Donald Trump's not the Antichrist because his name doesn't add up to 666. We'll get there in a second.
616. You mean?
That
No,
confused me to
666.
666.
Yeah, we'll get there. We got 15 minutes. We should at least get to the end of chapter 13. Everybody clear on what this guy does, at least a little bit. Comes up out of the sea. Why does he come up out of the sea? Sea is often a reference to Gentile nations. You've got the sea and the land. This is all throughout the prophets. The land is always a reference to Israel, the promised land. The land that God promised to Abraham, right? I will give to you and your offspring a land stretching from the Nile to the river Euphrates, right? The land that is promised them. This is always what it's referenced to. And the sea is everything beyond the land. Always a reference to Gentile nations, which is what makes me suspect the beast, he comes up from the sea, just like the 4 beasts from Daniel came up out of the sea. These are all Gentile nations, Babylon, Persia, Greece, and Rome. They're non-Jewish peoples and leaders. So I think that the beast, the Antichrist, is going to be someone who's not Jewish. Okay? He's going to be this world leader who comes on the scene. Obviously, the leopard, bear, lion. You see that from the Daniel vision. See how that connects? Same animals. He's worshipped. He's given authority for 42 months, and he makes war with the saints. So this is when the dragon had the river going after the woman in the wilderness, couldn't find it. Turns his attention back to those who believe, the saints. How is he doing it? He's doing it through the beast. This is how he's empowering the beast to go and make war. And everybody's like, yeah, kill the Christians. Can't even imagine that happening on Earth, right? It's not like that goes on every day. We're just lucky we live here. What happens after that? Verse 11. I saw another beast rising up out of the earth, the land. It had 2 horns like a lamb, and it spoke like a dragon. It exercises all the authority of the first beast in its presence, and makes the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast, whose mortal wound was healed. It performs great signs, even making fire come down from heaven to earth in front of people. And by the signs that it was allowed to work in the presence of the beast, it deceives those who dwell on earth, telling them to make an image of the beast that was wounded by the sword and yet lived. And it was allowed to give breath to the image of the beast, so that the image of the beast might even speak and might cause those who would not worship the image of the beast to be slain. Also, it caused all, both small and great, both rich and poor, both free and slave, to be marked on the right hand or on the forehead, so that no one can buy or sell unless he has the mark, that is, the name of the beast or the number of its name. Pause right there. This second beast, I call him the prophet. Reasons because he does things that a prophet kind of did, right? He preaches for the beast. He's got the horns of a lamb, but the voice of a dragon. What's that saying? What's the metaphor there?
He resembles the lamb, but he is a dragon.
All right, Father Elias, right? He seems like this really great guy who is coming in like Jesus kind of figure. Looks like the lamb, but wolf in sheep's clothing kind of talk, right? I think he's Jewish. Why do I think he's Jewish? Because he came from the land. So you got one from each, right? Makes the earth worship the first beast. Performs miracles. Gets men to make an image of the beast and gives breath to it. Do you notice I have that on the slide later. This is unfortunate. I try to find more realistic images for you guys and not give you the cartoons.
You should draw your own.
I'm actually thinking about actually just going through and painting everything in Revelation and doing that. But this just gives the actual best, most literal representation of the text that I found anywhere. You've got the beast with 7 heads and 10 horns, with crowns on the horns, representing he's a royal ruler, he's a king. Might even be that there's a 10-nation kind of federation that he's leading. That's something often proposed because of things in Daniel that I won't get into right now. But the idea, the beast comes up out of this 10-nation federation. Lots of people said for a long time, this is the UN, and then they weren't, or the EU. But Brexit fixed that, so. There's the dragon, also 7 heads, 10 horns. Here's the prophet, right, the second beast. He's performing signs and wonders, and he deceives many people, and he gives them the mark of the beast, which is 666, on their foreheads or on their hands. And he's leading everybody astray. He comes up out of land. He comes up out of the sea. He got everything in this picture very well. And he convinces them to make an image of the beast and breathes into the image. Now, this is where I start to disagree with a lot of interpreters. The prophet convinces the people to make an image. Pick up in that. Verse 14. Signs that was allowed to work in the presence of the beast. It deceives those who dwell on the earth, telling them, make an image for the beast that was wounded by the sword and yet lived. And it was allowed to give breath to the image of the beast, is how the ESV translate this. It's the same, it's of the beast, or for the beast, either way. So that the image of the beast might even speak and might cause those who would not worship the image of the beast to be slain. Notice the language here. Something made in something's image and given breath. What does that remind you of? Creation of man, right? God created man in his own image, breathed into him the breath of life. Exact same language there. So I actually think that this is the image of the beast is not some statue. Lots of people suggest it's a statue. They're like, this technology that is going to come up and it's going to be like the image of whoever this world leader is, and he's going to look like him. And I'm thinking,
3D printing.
Yeah, I'm not totally confident of that. I think we might be talking about another man or some. This is get really, really out there. This is akin to the fax machine prediction. I've told you about the fax machine prediction, right? So I'm about to break my own rule, but my rule is don't get too caught up in making very specific predictions, particularly about technology, in the fulfillment of end times prophecy. Good example of one who did was a guy who wrote a whole book, and when the fax machine was invented, it was the fastest communication and sending of documents, right? And he was convinced that the fax machine was going to play a big role in fulfilling end times prophecies. because of how instantaneous this communication is. But does anybody, do the younger guys in here even know what a fax machine is?
I know the fact.
You know what a fax machine is? Okay. Have you ever used one?
No, I know what it is.
I've
Okay.
touched one.
Yeah.
It's like a scanner.
They don't even hardly exist anymore. That is it's a caution of don't be making very specific predictions about what the end times are, or how technology is going to factor into fulfilling the end times. So I'm going to give you two now that I put with a big caveat. I'm not saying this definitely is how this is going to be fulfilled. I'm suggesting
It's going to be a global spinning unit.
this is some kind of possibility that makes this, puts a little bit teeth into it. Something that we can try and understand it a little bit, what it might be like when it comes along. Makes an image of the beast and breathes life into it. Has the thought of cloning ever been made on Earth? Yeah, I think so. This kind of perhaps this is somebody who comes along and clones the beast, and this is a marvel that convinces many to be deceived and brought away by this promise of utopian future because of the advancement of cloning.
It's Elon Musk.
He's not Jewish.
It's the chip that he's making for our brains so we can download them into other things.
Well, yeah, there's another one that everybody goes for. Where are you?
What's on here?
So we've talked through most of this. Gentile nations, Lion Leopard. All of this is in your handout. You can go through. The other thing that I wanted to bring up. Oh yeah, I just wanted to keep going in the text. Silly rabbit. Trickster for kids. Causes a shutdown. So the way I summarize this, causes a shutdown of all trade without the mark of the first beast he gives. So one of the other things this guy does is he convinces everyone, or gives everyone, a mark of the beast. And the mark, read verse 17 and 18 with me. No one can buy or sell unless he has the mark, that is, the name of the beast or the number of its name. This calls for wisdom. Let the one who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. What is all of this a reference to? Question? Or I just saw you start to talk, so
No.
okay. What is this all a reference to?
It's a number.
In Greek, numbers are represented by letters. They didn't have the number system we have now, like this. These are called does anybody know what these are called?
See,
Arabic.
The Arabic numerals, right? Didn't have this. You had Roman numerals and Arabic numerals now. In Greek, the way you would write these numbers is you would write the letter. So some manuscripts actually have Ki Xi Si, or Ki Xi Sigma, or Ki Xi Digamma as what's in the text right there, where it says the number of a man is 666. Some of it have it spelled out, 666. What does this mean? Well, common practice, the way that you would find the number of a man, is you would spell out his name, the lexical form of his name, and you'd add up the numbers. So Stephanos, my name, would be Sigma, Tau, Epsilon. Somebody be adding this up as I'm going. Phi.
No, that's right.
Yeah, you're over.
200, 500, 1,000, 1,005. So yeah, I'm not the Antichrist.
Dang. That's
I was
the whole
worried
reason
there.
I was coming.
So yeah, you can find out if you're in the Antichrist. You can find out if Donald Trump is the Antichrist. Translate his name into Greek and add up the numbers.
Do we have that website on here, that watch thing?
Yeah, so that's what I'm about to do. So the number, or the mark of the beast is a number, and the number is the number of a man. So
No, I think it was you who also said that. I don't know. It might have been someone else, but I heard somewhere that in other manuscripts it was written 696.
616.
Oh, 616,
So yeah,
yeah.
some manuscripts have 616 written there. 616. They are few and less reliable. There's one very old manuscript that comes from this is a little bit too technical, comes from a less reliable strain of manuscripts that has 616, but it's very old. So that kind of gives it a little bit of weight. But the vast majority of the textual support is 666. However, if the Antichrist shows up and his number is actually 616, not going to bother me too much. Put it that way. Yeah. Exactly. I believe in a pre-trib rapture, so since I believe it, that's definitely the truth, and I won't be here when he shows up.
I'm only a 409.
Your name is Hebrew, so how to translate the Natan into Greek would be Nun, Alpha, Theta.
Oh, it's Theta,
Alpha,
not
Nun.
Tau?
Yeah, you'd be Theta.
Okay.
Which is
So it's a lot less than
It's a lot
409.
less. The number of the beast is what is the mark of the beast, right? Verse 17, so that no one can buy or sell unless he has the mark, that is, the name of the beast, or the number of its name. So the mark of the beast that everybody's getting marked with is the number of the beast, 666.
Or his 3 initials.
Or his 3 initials.
Or,
3 initials.
Or
yeah, 'cause
some
it's
other
listed
thing
as
that represents the
BC.
beast.
And
And this thing, this mark, is what allows you to buy or sell. So, whatever's going on in the world at that time, or at least in Jerusalem, I think the whole world, no one can buy or sell unless he has the mark of the beast. Which is the name of, and the mark is on the hand or the head.
what's apple in Greek?
I've checked that. It's not Apple. Another wild technology prediction that will look very bad as history moves along. But and thank you, YouTube. I have to have ads.
They're really upping that rate too.
It's not showing on the screen.
Oh, it's not.
This is exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas before, this was a kind of a weird thing. It's like, what if people are going to have a mark on their body that allows them to buy or sell? Electronic tattoos are not that far away that are going to literally allow you to store information and interact with electronic devices. Google is producing electronic tattoos that will store credit card information. It's really cool technology. But it's not that science fiction-y anymore. So the suggestion that you're going to have some kind of mark on your hand or your head that allows you to buy or sell things isn't too ridiculous.
Why graphene hasn't taken over the world yet?
Well, I should have quit it.
It's not looking good. But I
You have to watch it.
No. So yeah, I'm not saying that electronic tattoos are going to be the mark of the beast.
But you are.
I'm saying that the possibility is there, and the outlandishness of this idea of a mark on your head or your hand that allows you to participate in trade in a society is not really that crazy.
It's going to be on our forehead, and we're going to have to bow to a picture of him every time we want to pay for something.
People are also. I've heard about getting like chips in your finger or your
Yeah.
arm.
Chips in your hand so you can wave and pay, right? Was really I couldn't find this video. 2014, Google was having this seminar on their new wearable tattoos and chip technology that they're talking about, and they were talking about this is going to be so amazing. And I'm actually wearing one right now, and she shows how on her hand, and you can get it in convenient locations here or like on your forehead if you're talking and you wanted to be able to scan with your. You think about the two places you just suggested where you could get a mark on your body that will allow you to engage in commerce. Like, really? Really?
But first, they're gonna come out with it on your left hand.
Does it say right hand?
Yes, it does. You said right hand at least.
Oh,
Yeah, I remember it saying right hand on the forehead.
on the right hand or on the forehead. Yeah, you're right. So yeah, I take these as fairly literal things that are going to happen. That a mark is going to be actually present on people's heads and hands that allows them to buy and sell. We didn't even get into chapter 14, and it's already time to finish up. So we'll pick up with chapter 14 next week. Let me look at what's planned for next week.
Though, up until this point, you've been doing really good, Stephen,
Yeah, about staying in. Yeah,
We can all
I knew when we hit 12 and 13, it was going to get
we
derailed.
can all study chapter 14 on our own.
Yeah, there's it's not that confusing of a chapter. There's just the stuff at the end.
We can study it on our own, and if we have any questions, we can bring them next week.
Yeah,
Which is technically what we were supposed to do this week. But
true story. Yeah, I didn't even think about that. That's what was what we were going to do, wasn't it?
well, Caleb did it apparently.
I have questions, but it's okay.
Did we answer all of them? Are there more?
I don't know. It was rough by the end. I was closing my eyes.
Okay. Which questions are there? And I'll tell you if we answered them. You can go watch it later.
Just who's the woman, and
Yes.
then
Israel.
yeah, we answered that one, and then
No, it's Mother Nature.
then I'm just kind of confused on the timeline of everything
Okay. That's going to just be a while.
because like everything kind of like the world was getting destroyed with stuff, and then like people be living in rocks, and then people are not living in rocks. There's streets still. I'm just kind of like
Right. Okay. So yeah, remember the lunch breaks
yeah.
are not necessarily in the flow of the chronological narrative. So yeah, every time we're doing a lunch break, this doesn't have to fit as this goes in between what just happened.
Okay.
So that everything in chapters 12 through 14 not chronologically in order with the progression of events in the Seals, Trumpets, Bowls, Tribulation, 7 years.
Not related to Revelation. Peace trip. What are the dates for that? Again?
24th, 25th, and 26th.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me,
Also, how many people are on the lands?
I'm about to discuss that.
Okay.
But my piece of advice was as you're trying to work through the chronology of Revelation, start with just getting real clear pictures of all the pieces, and be really clear about what information is in each piece. And as you, over the years, you'll be reading this again, most likely, and the more times you read it, the more pieces just sort of start to lock into place, and it starts to make more sense.
So do it before you're too old, because then you won't remember once you get to a certain point.
But that's only because you
These
failed
are
to
the
read the
pieces.
passage.
No, she will attack.
What I've really noticed is, and I've actually been guilty of it as I've been teaching you guys this, is instead of learning the pieces that are actually described in the text, you learn the interpretation that somebody gives you of the pieces. And you attach that interpretation to the text, and then you run into something where two interpretations butt up against each other, and one of them's wrong, but you don't know how to reconcile them, so you just kind of sit there and try to hold it in tension because you were learning the interpretation, not the text. So be really clear when you try and use the text's language as much as possible. That's why usually when I'm teaching you guys, I just have a lot of quotes straight out of the Bible up on the screen. And I try and just summarize exactly what's in the text. Revelation is really tough because you kind of are trying to interpret as you go along to make sense of it, otherwise you get lost. But always try to keep in mind what the actual pieces are as opposed to what the interpretation is. And if you get the pieces really, really clear, the interpretation will start to work itself out. So